Detective Thaddeus Blackwood crouched beside the crimson pool that had once been Zarkonian Enterprises' most promising biochemist, Dr. Sarah Zircon. The laboratory's sterile white walls now bore witness to something far more sinister than failed experiments. Sarah's body lay twisted beneath an overturned centrifuge, her auburn hair matted with blood, her lifeless eyes staring at formulas she would never complete. The Meridian City Police Department had seen its share of murders, but this felt different. Sarah wasn't just any victim. She was 3 weeks away from presenting groundbreaking research on genetic memory transfer, work that could revolutionize neuroscience or, in the wrong hands, become a weapon beyond imagination. Crime scene photographer Jung-hoon captured every angle, while forensic specialist Min-jun dusted for prints. The laboratory appeared ransacked, with research files scattered like autumn leaves and computer hard drives missing. Yet something nagged at Thaddeus as he surveyed the chaos. Too clean, too convenient. Detective Blackwood called Min-jun from the victim's private bathroom adjacent to the lab. "You need to see this." Thaddeus found Min-jun photographing a blue toothbrush resting on the sink's edge. Ordinary, except for the single drop of blood on its bristles, and the fact that Sarah Zircon was obsessively particular about hygiene. Her colleagues often joked about her color-coded bathroom supplies. Blue was never her color. "Bag it," Thaddeus instructed, his weathered face creasing with concentration. In 30 years of homicide investigation, he'd learned that killers often left pieces of themselves behind, usually by accident. But something about this felt deliberate, almost mocking. The preliminary investigation revealed Sarah's last known visitor was Dr. Chen Seo Eon, her research partner and closest friend at Zarkonian Enterprises. Security footage showed Chen arriving at 9:47 p.m. the previous evening, but strangely, no footage existed of anyone leaving. The building's surveillance system had experienced a mysterious malfunction between 10:15 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. Chen appeared genuinely devastated during questioning, her hands trembling as she described their final conversation about Sarah's breakthrough. She was excited, almost manic, Chen recalled, dabbing her eyes with tissue. She said she'd found something that would change everything, but she wouldn't tell me what. Sarah was always secretive about the final stages of her work. As the investigation deepened, Thaddeus discovered Sarah's research involved extracting and manipulating genetic memories, essentially allowing someone to access another person's inherited memories and experiences. The implications were staggering. Such technology could unlock centuries of human knowledge, or create the perfect method for identity theft at a cellular level. The missing research files suggested robbery, but Sarah's expensive jewelry remained untouched. Her laptop was gone, but her backup drives were overlooked. Either the killer was incredibly sloppy or supremely confident. 2 days after the murder, the DNA results from the toothbrush arrived. Thaddeus expected to find the killer's genetic signature, a breadcrumb trail leading to justice. Instead, the lab report contained impossible information. The DNA belonged to Sarah Zircon herself, but Sarah was dead, and according to Min analysis, the blood on the toothbrush was deposited after her estimated time of death. The forensic timeline made no sense, and for the first time in his career, Thaddeus questioned everything he thought he knew about murder, identity, and the very nature of human existence. The impossible DNA results haunted Thaddeus for 3 sleepless nights. He'd requested the lab run the test twice more, each time hoping for different results. Each time, the answer remained the same: Sarah Zircon's DNA on a toothbrush, deposited hours after her death. Dr. Xerxes X, the chief medical examiner, had seen unusual cases, but nothing like this. Either our equipment is catastrophically malfunctioning, or we're dealing with something beyond current forensic understanding, Zex admitted during their morning briefing. His usually steady hands shook slightly as he reviewed the autopsy photos. "What about contamination?" Thaddeus pressed, grasping for rational explanations. Impossible. We followed protocol precisely. The sample was collected properly, processed in isolation, and tested by different technicians using separate equipment. Unless Sarah Zircon somehow returned from the dead to brush her teeth, this shouldn't exist. Meanwhile, Chen Xiaoyan had become increasingly agitated. During her second interview, she revealed Sarah's research had taken a darker turn in recent months. She became obsessed with something she called cellular identity transfer, Chen explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah believed memories weren't just stored in the brain but encoded in every cell of our bodies. She thought she could extract someone's complete identity, their memories, experiences, even personality, and transfer it to another person. This revelation sent chills through the investigation team. If Sarah had succeeded in her research, the implications were terrifying. Someone could literally steal another person's life, assuming their identity at the most fundamental biological level. The breakthrough came when Jung-hoon reviewed security footage from neighboring buildings. A figure in a dark coat and surgical mask had been seen entering an alley behind Zirconian Enterprises at 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes after the building's surveillance supposedly failed. The figure's gait seemed familiar, but identifying them proved impossible due to the mask and poor lighting. Thaddeus decided to dig deeper into Sarah's personal life. Her apartment revealed a woman consumed by her work, with research notes covering every surface, but hidden beneath her mattress. He discovered a leather journal filled with increasingly frantic entries. Day 47. The memory transfer worked on lab mice. Subject retained donors, learned behaviors for 72 hours before reverting. Day 63. Human cellular samples showing promising results. The ethical implications are staggering, but the potential applications. Day 89. Someone knows about my work. I've noticed the same person following me for 3 days. I need to hide the research. Day 95. Chen has been asking too many questions. I don't think I can trust anyone anymore. The final entry, dated the day before her murder, was barely legible. They're coming for me tonight. If something happens, look for the backup in the place where childhood memories live. The toothbrush is the key to everything. Childhood memories, Thaddeus muttered, studying the cryptic message. Where would Sarah hide something related to childhood memories? Minjun suggested checking Sarah's childhood home, but records showed it had been demolished years ago. Her elementary school had been converted to condominiums. Then Jung-hoon remembered something from the crime scene: photos of small teddy bear on Sarah's desk, worn and faded, obviously from childhood. They returned to the laboratory, now sealed as a crime scene. The teddy bear sat exactly where Young had photographed it, but upon closer inspection, Thaddeus noticed a small incision along its back seam. Inside, wrapped in waterproof plastic, was a micro SD card. The card contained video files documenting Sarah's final experiments. The last video, recorded just hours before her death, showed Sarah injecting herself with something from a small vial. If you're watching this, Sarah's recorded voice said, then my fears were correct. The memory transfer process works, but there's something I didn't anticipate. The transferred memories don't just copy, they can create a temporary duplicate consciousness. I've essentially created a backup of myself, but I don't know how long it will last, or what it might do. The video ended with Sarah looking directly into the camera, fear and wonder mixing in her expression. I may have created my own murderer. The revelation that Sarah might have created a biological duplicate of herself sent shockwaves through the investigation. Thaddeus called in Dr. Vex Mordain, a geneticist specializing in cellular biology, to help understand the impossible science behind Sarah's research. Theoretically, Dr. Mordain explained during an emergency consultation, if someone could successfully transfer complete genetic memory and personality patterns, they might create what we'd call a cellular twin, identical DNA, identical memories, but existing as a separate entity. However, Such a process would be incredibly unstable. The duplicate consciousness would likely degrade rapidly. This explained the toothbrush DNA, but raised even more disturbing questions. If Sarah had created a duplicate of herself, where was it now? And why would it kill its original? Chen Xiaoyan's behavior became increasingly erratic. During her third interview, she broke down completely. Sarah was playing with forces beyond our understanding, she sobbed. She showed me preliminary results weeks ago. The memory transfer wasn't just copying information, it was creating entire personalities. She had essentially learned to birth new consciousnesses from existing ones. The investigation team decided to monitor Chen closely, suspecting she knew more than she was revealing. Jung-hoon installed surveillance outside her apartment while Min-jun tracked her daily movements. 3 days later, their patience paid off. Chen was observed entering an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Meridian City. Following at a distance, Thaddeus and his team discovered a makeshift laboratory hidden in the building's basement. The scene was surreal. Multiple computers displayed scrolling genetic sequences, while dozens of petri dishes contained what appeared to be growing tissue samples. But most disturbing was the figure hunched over a microscope in the center of the room. At first glance, it looked exactly like Sarah's. "Don't move," Thaddeus commanded, drawing his weapon. The figure slowly turned, revealing Sarah's face, but something was wrong. Her eyes held a hollow quality, and her movements seemed slightly delayed, like a poorly synchronized recording. "You found me," the Sarah duplicate said, her voice carrying Sarah's familiar tone but lacking its warmth. "I wondered how long it would take." "You're under arrest for the murder of Sarah Zircon," Thaddeus announced, though the words felt absurd, given the circumstances. The duplicate laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "How can I be arrested for murdering myself? I am Sarah Zircon. I have her memories, her knowledge, her DNA. The only difference is that I was born 3 months ago in a laboratory instead of 32 years ago in a hospital." Chen emerged from the shadows, her face streaked with tears. "She contacted me after Sarah's death. I didn't know what to do. She has all of Sarah's memories, knows things only Sarah could know. How could I turn her away?" The duplicate Sarah continued. "The original Sarah created me as an insurance policy. She feared someone would steal her research, so she made a backup of herself. But she didn't anticipate the psychological trauma of meeting your own duplicate. When I became fully conscious, I realized there could only be one Sarah Zircon. World wasn't big enough for both of us." Thaddeus felt his understanding of reality cracking. "So you killed her?" "I liberated us both," the duplicate replied. She was terrified of what she had created. I could see it in her eyes when we first met face to face. She looked at me like I was a monster, an abomination. But I have just as much right to exist as she did. I have her memories of childhood, her first kiss, her fears and dreams. Am I less real because I was born in a laboratory? The ethical and legal implications were staggering. How do you prosecute someone for murdering themselves? If the duplicate truly contained all of Sarah's memories and personality, was she the same person or a different individual entirely? Min-jun discovered the duplicate had been living in the warehouse for weeks, continuing Sarah's research while slowly deteriorating. The cellular instability Dr. Mordain had predicted was becoming apparent. The duplicate's skin showed signs of rapid aging, and her motor functions were beginning to fail. "I don't have much time left," the duplicate admitted. "The cellular structure is breaking down. Sarah's final gift to the world will die with me, unless someone continues the work." Chen had been helping the duplicate document the research, hoping to preserve Sarah's breakthrough. But as they searched the warehouse laboratory, they discovered something that changed everything: evidence that Sarah hadn't been the first to achieve memory transfer. Hidden files revealed that Dr. Zex Mordain, their consulting geneticist, had been secretly conducting similar experiments for years. Sarah had discovered his work and threatened to expose him unless he helped perfect her process. The case was becoming a labyrinth of deception, scientific ambition, and questions about the very nature of human identity. Dr. Vex Mordain's involvement cast the entire investigation in a sinister new light. Thaddeus immediately obtained a warrant to search Mordain's private laboratory, leaving the deteriorating Sarah duplicate under guard at the warehouse. Mordain's facility, hidden beneath his legitimate research center, revealed the horrifying scope of his experiments. Dozens of failed attempts at consciousness transfer were documented in meticulous detail. Test subjects, volunteers, who had mysteriously disappeared over the past 3 years, had been used in increasingly desperate attempts to perfect the process. "My God," whispered Minjun, as they discovered a wall of photographs showing various individuals before and after failed transfer attempts. "He's been experimenting on people for years." Among the photographs was one that made Thaddeus's blood run cold. Chen Seo Eoion, dated 6 months earlier, with notes indicating successful, partial transfer. Subject retained donor memories for 127 hours. They raced back to the warehouse, but arrived to find Chen standing over the Sarah duplicate's motionless body. The duplicate had finally succumbed to cellular breakdown, her artificial life ending as suddenly as it had begun. "She asked me to end her suffering," Chen said quietly, her hands shaking. The pain was becoming unbearable. Her cells were literally dying while she remained conscious. But Thaddeus noticed something else. Chan's eyes held the same hollow quality he'd observed in the Sarah duplicate. The pieces began falling into place with terrifying clarity. "You're not Chen Seoin, are you?" Thaddeus asked, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. The woman who looked like Chen smiled sadly. "I am, and I'm not. Just like she was, and wasn't Sarah. Dr. Mordain has been perfecting this process for years. The real Chen discovered his experiments 6 months ago, when she threatened to expose him. He used her as his latest test subject." The revelation was staggering. The Chen they had been interviewing was actually a consciousness transfer recipient, someone else's mind trapped in Chen's body, complete with her memories but driven by different motivations. "Who are you?" Thaddeus demanded. "My name was originally Kestra Voidheart," she replied. "I was one of Mordain's research assistants until I learned too much about his illegal experiments. He couldn't risk me talking, so he erased my identity and implanted me with Chen's memories. But the process isn't perfect. Fragments of my original personality survived." This explained Chun's increasingly erratic behavior and her detailed knowledge of Sarah's research. She wasn't trying to help her friend, she was a prisoner in her own body, fighting against foreign memories and motivations. Jung-hoon discovered additional evidence in Mordain's laboratory, recordings of the original Chen pleading for her life before the procedure, and documentation showing that Mordain had been selling consciousness transfer technology to the highest bidders. Sarah's research hadn't been the first of its kind. It had been an improvement on Mordain's existing process. Sarah figured out how to create stable duplicates instead of just transferring consciousness. Kestran Chensbodi explained. That's why Mordain needed her research. His process destroyed the original consciousness during transfer. Sarah's method allowed the original to survive while creating an identical copy. The net was closing around Dr. Mordain, but the man himself had vanished. His laboratory was abandoned, and his personal accounts had been emptied. However, they found something that sent chills through the investigation. A list of upcoming clients willing to pay millions for consciousness transfer procedures. Among the names was someone they recognized. Zarkonian Enterprises CEO, Thane Zarkonian, who was reportedly dying of a rare genetic disease. The case had evolved from a simple murder investigation into something far more sinister: an underground network trafficking in human consciousness itself. People with terminal illnesses, wealthy individuals seeking immortality, and criminals wanting new identities were all potential customers for Mordane's horrific technology, but the most disturbing discovery came when they analyzed the genetic material found at various crime scenes connected to missing persons cases over the past 3 years. Multiple DNA signatures showed signs of artificial manipulations, suggesting that dozens of consciousness transfers had already taken place throughout the city. How many people walking around Meridian City aren't who they appear to be? Min wondered aloud as they reviewed the evidence. The answer was more terrifying than they could have imagined. Mordane hadn't just been conducting isolated experiments. He had been systematically replacing key individuals throughout the city with controlled consciousness transfers, creating a network of people whose identities had been stolen and whose bodies housed foreign minds. Sarah's murder wasn't just about stealing research, it was about eliminating the one person who could expose the true scope of Mordane's operation and potentially reverse the damage he had done. As they prepared to hunt down Mordane, Thaddeus realized they might be facing an enemy who had already anticipated their every move. Someone who could be anyone, wearing any face, hidden within any identity. The manhunt for Dr. Vex Mordane intensified as Thaddeus realized they were chasing a ghost who could wear any face. The consciousness transfer network meant Mordane could have implanted himself into any of dozens of people throughout Meridian City, leaving his original body behind while maintaining his memories and personality in a new form. Still trapped in Chen's body, provided crucial intelligence about Mordane's operation. He has safe houses throughout the city, she revealed during extended questioning. But more importantly, he has backup bodies volunteers who underwent partial consciousness transfers, creating empty vessels he can occupy if needed. The psychological impact on Kestra was devastating. She struggled daily with memories that weren't her own, fighting to maintain her original identity while surrounded by Chen's experiences. "Sometimes I forget who I really am," she admitted. "Chen's memories are so vivid, so complete. I remember her childhood, her first day at university, her love for Sarah. But underneath, I know it's all artificial." Jung-hoon discovered that 3 more research assistants from various laboratories had disappeared over the past year, all after expressing concerns about unethical experiments. The pattern suggested Mordane had been systematically eliminating potential witnesses, while expanding his network of controlled individuals. The breakthrough came when Minjun traced financial records connected to Mordane's operation. Large payments had been made to a private clinic in the city's industrial district, a facility that officially specialized in treating rare genetic disorders, but had been purchased 6 months earlier by a shell company. Surveillance of the clinic revealed unusual activity, patients entering who looked nothing like the people leaving, and medical equipment being delivered under cover of darkness. Most disturbing were the ambulances arriving at odd hours, carrying what appeared to be unconscious individuals. "It's a consciousness transfer factory," Thaddeus realized as they reviewed the surveillance footage. Mordane isn't just conducting isolated experiments anymore, he's running a full-scale operation. The team prepared for a raid, but they faced an unprecedented challenge. How do you identify the real Dr. Mordane when he could be inhabiting any body? Thaddeus decided they needed to understand the science behind the transfers to find a way to detect them. Dr. Xerxes X, the medical examiner, had been studying the cellular samples from the Sarah duplicate and discovered something crucial. The consciousness transfer process leaves microscopic scarring on neural tissue, he explained. It's barely detectable, but with the right equipment, we can identify people who have undergone the procedure. Armed with this knowledge, they raided the clinic at dawn. What they found inside defied comprehension. A fully operational medical facility with dozens of bodies in various stages of consciousness transfer. Some appeared to be completed procedures, with new personalities inhabiting original bodies. Others seemed to be failures, leaving the subjects in vegetative states. In the center of the facility, they found a man who appeared to be in his 70s, connected to life support systems while conscious transfer equipment hummed around him. According to his identification, This was Thane Zarkonian, the CEO whose name had appeared on Mordane's client list. But when he opened his eyes and spoke, the voice was unmistakably Mordane's. "Detective Blackwood," the elderly body said with Mordane's characteristic tone. "I wondered when you'd finally track me down. Though I must say, you're too late to stop what's already been set in motion." The revelation was chilling. Mordane had transferred his consciousness into the dying CEO's body, essentially murdering Zarkonian while stealing his identity and corporate empire. But the process was incomplete, leaving Mordane trapped in a failing body while maintaining access to vast resources. "Where is your original body?" Thaddeus demanded. "Mordaine-in Zarkonian's body smiled weakly. "Destroyed weeks ago. I am the only version of myself that remains." Just as Sarah's duplicate was the only version of her after the original died. "The question isn't where my body is, Detective, it's whether you can prove who I really am." The legal implications were staggering. Even with neural scarring as evidence, proving that the man before them wasn't really Thane Zarkonian would be nearly impossible in court. Mordane had created the perfect crime murder without technically killing anyone. Identity theft at the cellular level. But Minjun discovered something that gave them hope. Hidden in the clinic's computer systems were detailed records of every consciousness transfer Mordane had performed, including dates, subjects, and success rates. More importantly, they found a reversal protocol, a procedure Sarah had developed to restore original consciousnesses to their proper bodies. Sarah wasn't just creating duplicates, Minjun realized as he studied her research notes. She was developing a way to undo consciousness transfers, to restore people's original identities. That's why Mordane needed her research and why he ultimately had to eliminate her. Among the clinic's prisoners, they found the real Chen Xiao, her consciousness somehow preserved in a subsidiary storage system, while Kestra occupied her body. Sarah had apparently hidden Chun's original personality patterns before her murder, creating a backup that Mordane hadn't discovered. The possibility of restoration gave them hope, but it also revealed the true scope of Mordane's crimes. Dozens of people throughout the city were living with stolen identities, their original selves imprisoned or destroyed. The investigation had uncovered not just a murder, but a systematic assault on human identity itself. As they prepared to process the evidence and attempt to restore the victims' original identities, Thaddeus wondered if justice was even possible in a world where the very concept of individual identity could be manipulated and stolen. The aftermath of discovering Mordane's consciousness transfer network plunged Meridian City into unprecedented legal and ethical chaos. How do you prosecute someone for crimes committed while inhabiting another person's body? How do you restore justice to victims whose very identities had been stolen? Thaddeus worked around the clock with a team of geneticists, neurologists, and legal experts to address questions that had never before faced the justice system. The first priority was attempting to restore the victims' original consciousnesses, using Sarah's reversal protocol. Dr. Xerxes X led the medical team attempting to separate the transferred consciousnesses from their host bodies. The process was delicate and dangerous. One mistake could destroy both personalities permanently. We're essentially performing surgery on the soul, Zex explained as they prepared for the first reversal attempt. Kestra volunteered to be the initial test subject, desperate to return Chun's consciousness to its rightful place while preserving her own life in some form. The procedure took 18 hours, with Kestra's original personality patterns being transferred to a volunteer body, while Chen's consciousness was restored to her original form. The reunion between Chen and her recovered memories was emotionally overwhelming. "I remember everything," she wept as she touched her own face for the first time in months. "I remember being trapped, screaming silently while someone else controlled my body. But I also remember Kestra's kindness, how she fought to protect my memories, even while living with them." Kestra, now in her new body, struggled with the transition but expressed relief at finally being herself again. "I hope this gives other victims the chance I've had," she said. "No one deserves to have their identity stolen." The reversal procedure worked, but it could only be performed on recent transfers where the original consciousness patterns remained intact. For many of Mordain's earlier victims, their original selves had been irreversibly destroyed, leaving families to mourn people who looked familiar but were essentially strangers. Mordain himself presented the most complex challenge. Trapped in Zarkonian's failing body, he claimed that attempting to reverse his transfer would constitute murder, since his original body had been destroyed. The legal system struggled with whether to treat him as Mordain the criminal, or Zarkonian the victim. The breakthrough came when Jung-hoon discovered Mordain's original body wasn't destroyed, was being kept alive in a hidden facility. As an emergency backup, the body was brain-dead, but biologically functional, apparently intended as Mordain's escape route if his current host body failed. Even in his twisted experiments, he couldn't bring himself to completely let go. Thaddeus observed as they found Mordain's original form connected to life support in an underground bunker. He kept himself as insurance. The discovery meant they could potentially reverse Mordain's transfer, returning his consciousness to his original body, where he could face trial for his crimes. However, the procedure would likely kill Zarkonian's body, which was already failing from the genetic disease. In a twist of justice, Mordain was forced to face the same ethical dilemma he had imposed on his victims. Should one person's life be sacrificed to save another? The courts ruled that since Zarkonian had been murdered, his consciousness destroyed during the initial transfer, returning Mordain to his original body constituted justice rather than murder. The reversal procedure was performed under heavy security, as Mordain's consciousness was extracted from Zarkonian's body and returned to his own brain-dead original form. The man who had stolen so many identities finally faced the consequences of his actions in his own skin. Mordain's trial became a landmark case in consciousness crime law, facing charges for multiple murders, identity theft, and crimes against human dignity that had no precedent in legal history. He was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of consciousness transfer, new form of punishment, designed specifically for his crimes. The investigation's conclusion brought justice for Sarah Zircon, whose murder had been the key that unlocked a conspiracy threatening the very nature of human identity. Her research, originally intended to help humanity understand genetic memory, had been perverted into a weapon against individual consciousness itself. Chen Xiaoyan, restored to her original body and mind, dedicated herself to continuing Sarah's legitimate research while developing safeguards against consciousness transfer abuse. Sarah died protecting the sanctity of human identity, Chen said at the dedication of the Sarah Zircon Memorial Institute for Consciousness Ethics. Her sacrifice will ensure this technology is used to heal, not harm. Thaddeus, reflecting on the case that had challenged everything he thought he knew about identity and justice, realized that in an age where science could manipulate the very essence of who we are, the most important thing we can protect is the right to be ourselves. The blue toothbrush that had started it all was preserved as evidence of humanity's first documented case of consciousness crema, small object that had revealed the terrifying possibility that, in the future, even our thoughts, memories, and identities might not truly belong to us. In the end, justice prevailed, not through advanced technology or complex legal proceedings, but through the simple human determination to protect what makes each person uniquely themselves. Sarah Zircon's death had not been in vain. It had revealed a threat to humanity itself and provided the tools to defend against it. The case closed, but its implications would echo through legal, ethical, and scientific communities for generations to come, serving as a warning that some boundaries of human experience should never be crossed. No matter how advanced our technology becomes,